you could just I just felt like I could tell. It's like they're not they're being honest enough to where it gets by, to
Yes.
where but they still wanna maintain, like, their image or, like, the status that they
Yes.
have
Yes.
because and it's
And then
just
they're
some
gonna
of the
leave
things.
here, and then they're gonna scream at a barista for not having peppermint mochas anymore
Yeah,
because it's
man,
not
like,
December.
it's not worth it, like, what are you
Right.
doing, you know?
Well, Tim Christiansen, thank you so much for joining me on Growing Up Fundie. I'm so excited to finally have you here for an episode. I know we've been trying to get one on the books and stuff kept happening and we kept having to reschedule, but you're here and I'm
Yes, I
stoked to have
am.
you. And
Yes.
enough for me. Tell us about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? What are you all about?
Okay, so like you said, my name is Tim Christiansen. So I'm from a small town in West Virginia, southern West Virginia, and it's called Beckley. And so, kind of there's not a whole lot much to do, and sort of like as I grew up there and developed interests and hobbies, especially around like music and things and DJing. I gradually was like doing school and then taking up DJ gigs for like weddings and school dances and
That's
kind of word
awesome.
got around locally. And then
Yeah.
I was doing like some sort of party or wedding for some couple, and then some gentleman comes up to me and he says, you know, my son goes to Belmont, and they have like an audio program there, and I didn't know what I was wanting to do at the time, so
Yeah.
it just kind of was like, okay, audio, sure. And then I just saw that Belmont was in Nashville, and so I went to Belmont for my undergrad. I just graduated like a year and a half ago, and
Yay.
sure. And then now I'm living here full time. So I do like LED video repair for like those concerts
Awesome.
so like those giant screens that you see at concerts.
That's
I fix
awesome.
them before they go out on the road.
That's
It's
so cool.
it's cool. It's just it can get tedious. I mean,
For
luckily
sure.
right now we're in the slow season, so it's not too bad. But it is, and like sometimes it's hard to remember like the kind of gigs that I'm working on, and it just like the idea of purpose and things of like,
Yeah.
is it going somewhere? And
Yeah.
so it's nice to kind of see it like fleshed out, and at least for concert goers, it's like it's making a difference. It's doing
Yeah.
something. So
Absolutely, and that's a unique skill. Like, it
yeah,
wasn't until you said that just now that I realized that is somebody's job, and
yeah,
somebody has to do that. That's wild. I can't believe I didn't know that.
yeah.
But I'm gonna be honest, I did not know that there would be Catholics in small town West Virginia. I had no
That's
idea.
because there's not really that many. I think they're all Methodist or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I would assume
Yeah, they're all
Baptist.
Methodist.
Yeah.
There's like a really small like Catholic population, but it's there, and that was kind of like how it all started. So especially with the music stuff. So many moons ago, when I was I think around like 5 or 6, my godfather and my dad uh, and a couple other friends, they got together and they mutually agreed that the Catholic Church music was not it. It was just an old lady playing an organ with an out of tune choir, and they weren't having it. So they got together and they decided we're gonna just do our own music. And so they they took us like as 5 and 6 years old, and they were like, hey, we're gonna start like this youth choir thing, and we're gonna have you all sing. And so I think we went up to our pastor, and then we asked if this was possible, which it was. So on Saturdays, for the vigil, it also counted as like Sunday in like Catholic realm. So that's kind of how that works. Like your Sunday obligation is fulfilled in a Saturday evening mass as well.
Interesting.
And
Okay.
so we were put on the spot to do Saturdays, and so we just I think it was like four men and their guitars, and then their children singing. And it was just like more contemporary stuff,
Yeah.
kind of like what you would hear in like the Southern Baptist sort of feel of things. And it got some positive response for sure. It was different, and then naturally
Interesting.
it kind of grew. Many more years since then, and I grew along with it, and so did my friends. And then in high school, when we were still doing it, that was kind of when we decided that we wanted to upgrade our sound. So we were just using the speakers from the church's old basement and like their old like PA
Yeah.
system. And so we were like, we can do better than that now, because now we have like, well, we didn't have the funds. We weren't paid for any of this. So this was
Yeah.
all just like out of our own pocket, where we're like, no, we should get something better. And so naturally, when my Ninong is uh, godfather in Tagalog or Filipino. So I'm half Filipino. So
Oh,
Ninong is that's what I
interesting.
call him. And so Ninong and I we went out and we bought some new Bose speakers or something. And because we bought them, we had to learn how to set them up. So I would help him set stuff up. And since then we had like many members come and go. We still had like a guitarist, and my godfather was like the piano player or the keyboardist. So he had like all his different like drum sounds and everything too.
Interesting.
And then uh, at some point his mom was the choir director, which was fantastic. Just looking back at it,
Yeah.
just to
And
see it all come together. And so when we would set up speakers and things, it was just like production just kind of kept getting bigger. We didn't really know what we would just kind of like see where it went, and hope for the best. But like it was cool because um it would be like Friday nights after school or something. There would be instances where I would have to go over to the church with him, and he's like, "Yo, we gotta set this up for Sunday so that we can practice, or like Saturday so that we can practice, before the service." And so sometimes we would be there from like 7 p.m. to like well past midnight, just to like
wow.
troubleshoot stuff, or like loading in. We were trying. So we were trying to be, I think, as Southern Baptist as possible without like all of the Southern Baptist practices, like
Without the
like
heathenism.
the production and everything. So we tried to like have our own TV. We had like this massive TV for some reason with this giant stand, and it was always such a pain in the butt to like lug up and down stairs or elevators. And so our church was very small too.
Yeah.
We don't have, it wasn't a big congregation, and so it would be things of like testing the video and then testing the audio and
And that's funny to
getting
me
all the,
because I grew up Southern Baptist, and to
yeah.
me, that was like stuffy and boring. So for somebody to be like, we want to be exciting like the Southern Baptist cracks me up.
Yeah, it is really funny because it was just like I mean, I don't know. I think when you go to a Catholic church, it can be very hit and miss. I understand like
Totally.
music
Totally.
isn't, it's not supposed to be the focal point, but it's still a part of it, no question. And
Yeah.
so some churches are really good with their music. Like the churches down here, they're really good with their
Like
music.
state of the art
But
music. Yeah.
but back home, it just felt like we were doing something revolutionary and just like something, totally different. And it came with a lot of positive feedback, but also some criticism. People were thinking that maybe it was too contemporary. It
Yeah.
didn't really
Yeah.
follow the traditional norms, that kind of thing.
There's always
Um,
the
there's
there's always
always
the
there's always
elders
that
that are
one
like,
group, and
yeah.
so um, it was funny though. Like we made it a whole thing, and then sometimes after finally setting stuff up, we would just go to like the cookout like 10 minutes down the road, and then just eat burgers at like 1 or 2 in the morning.
That's funny. Is that
And
like a
then
restaurant? The cookout?
yeah, cookout. So like the cookout here,
Oh,
like the franchise. Oh, so yeah, they do like their burgers and their fries
oh,
or
nice.
whatever, and I guess they're open until like I don't know, well past midnight. It's like I guess like high food or something, stoner food, basically.
Yeah, like,
Um,
it's never sober food. You're not
right,
eating
right.
sober food at 3
So,
o'clock in the
so
morning.
that's what we would always just be eating after set up, and then we would do the show or the service the next day, and then tear everything down. But my gosh, it was still it's cool because
Yeah.
I went back for like our annual Christmas party back home, and it was just kind of cool to sort of reminisce on that. And then from the choir stuff, that's sort of how DJing sort of happened, where
Yeah.
there was a lot of similarity. And so I started DJing from like the DJ Hero video game that came out. So it was like the Guitar Hero.
No way,
Um,
there's a
yeah,
DJ Hero?
there is. Oh my gosh.
I
Yeah.
I didn't know this. This is
No,
wild.
this well, it's probably because it didn't sell too well, but they're damn good games. I would say they're better
That's
than
hilarious.
Guitar Hero. You need to look it up. It's fantastic.
That's
So that
funny.
was how I started DJing. Was because he had this DJ Hero video game, and then I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And then so I got into DJing, for realsies, and then he did. Um, I think like a year and a half or so later, and then now, by that point, we were doing gigs at St. Francis, which was the parish I grew up in, and doing, DJ gigs together. And so that kind of eventually fueled the interest to pursue a degree in audio, and
That's cool.
now, now, now
And
I'm here.
is Belmont a Catholic school? It is, right? Or no?
No, I think I think it's Baptist
It is
technically.
a religious school, though?
It is a religious school. I think they're trying to move to non-denominational now.
That just
I
means Baptist.
oh,
That
okay.
just means
You
Baptist.
know, that's what I thought. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I don't know. So
Yeah.
I haven't really kept in touch with them since I graduated,
Yeah.
but,
Yeah,
um
non-denominational always just means Baptist. That's all
okay,
that means. Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
good to know.
Um, and so we were talking before we went on the record, and you were talking about how you still consider yourself a Catholic and you still
Mhm.
consider yourself a religious person, but you've been confronted in the last few years with just questions and thoughts and
Yeah,
observations you've been making. And I thought it was important to kind of highlight that for the audience, that you can still
mhm,
be religious and you can still be Catholic or Baptist or Presbyterian or whatever,
mhm,
and still question some of the things that you're taught and told
yes,
that you need to believe in order to have that
yes.
label. So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I do want to say that I think, by definition, like faith is just something that you believe in, whether you
Mm,
can't see or hear it. And I think a big part of faith is asking questions, And honestly, like that's a lot of what like the Bible and the characters in the Bible did. A lot of them actually did question God and questioned what He was like why should we do this or why shouldn't we do this. So I
right.
think things of like faith, it's something it's never stagnant. you're
Right.
always you're always
Right.
trying to like learn more and so on and so forth from it, and seeing what you can gather from it. So like that's kind of how I see it. I think it's not good to always be, set in your ways, and to see things as this is how it is and this is it set in stone.
Yes.
Um, because it's clearly not, and it's evident by that because there's so many denominations now of Christianity, and
Mm,
it's because
right.
there were people that they agreed with some parts but not with others, and so they
Right.
branched off and did their own thing. And now
Right.
you just have so many different people doing so many different things. In the Bible itself, it's like when you look at the different gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're all kind of telling the same story, but they're telling it differently because it's being presented to different communities. And so,
Yes.
because of that, it's like, here's a way that I can present the same message that resonates with this person or
Right.
this group and this person and this group. And so it just kind of shows it's like I don't know. I think as like modern day Christians, it's like you're you almost feel intimidated to question things, but it's also
Yeah.
weird how that is because I feel like the Bible and God himself or Christianity itself encourages it. How are you
Yes.
supposed to like grow in your faith and understand more about Jesus if you don't ask questions, you
Truly,
know?
truly. Yeah, yeah, Christian parents reach out to me, and a lot of times they ask me, like, what could have been done differently in my church growing up to make me stay a Christian? They're like, "What are some things that would have helped you stay in the church instead of leave?" And one of my answers is always allowing me to ask questions and not shaming me out of asking questions.
Yeah,
Because I think in order to truly believe something, you should be able to ask questions and
yeah,
be confused and
yeah,
look into things and explore what the opposite
yeah,
is, and then be encouraged to find the answers to your questions as
yeah,
opposed to shamed out of asking them even though they're
yeah.
never going to go away.
Yes, and the thing too is it's everything is about intention. So, like,
Yes.
when you
Yes.
look, like, if I'm doing something or not doing something just because someone told me this is what God wants me to do or what he doesn't want me to do, you're
Yes.
not in my life, Like, you don't know what goes on outside
Right.
of these double doors at church.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
like, God, I think he can just show up in different ways for different people,
Definitely.
and in different forms too, which is why I think like the idea of just Christianity itself and God himself, it's just like a really powerful idea. And so I think whether or not people believe, it's neat that there's so much that can come out of a mere concept, whether you use it as
Right.
like a moral compass, and then as you grow older, it's like it's just part of human nature to start asking questions and
Right. Right.
figuring out what your purpose is. Because even in the
Absolutely.
Bible, it doesn't even really specifically state like here's what you should and shouldn't do. And
Right.
there's so many different interpretations now of the Bible, and people always say where, like, oh, there's always so much we can, learn from the Bible. And I'm honestly shocked with how, as many theologians and biblical scholars as there are, it's like there's still so much more to unpack, which is
Right.
really interesting. And it's just because
Super interesting.
there's always a different person asking different questions because they have a different perspective on it from person A. And so
Right.
that's what's fascinating about it is
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
religion, it's not supposed to be something that was like set in stone. And again, if I just believe something just because someone told me to or because they shamed me out of something, then I just feel like it wouldn't be fair to God or to myself, really, It's
Right.
just like it's like this idea of just being like I'm doing this just for the image sake. And I think that's like that that touches on like a whole other issue itself of
Right. Right. Somebody's lying at that point. You're
yeah,
either lying that you don't have questions, or you're lying that you found the answers that you need,
yeah,
or you're being dishonest to yourself or to God or to your family or your church members
yeah,
about something at that point. And
yeah,
that doesn't do anybody any good.
yeah.
Yeah. And so what are some examples of things that you're like, that maybe that's tough to hear, or I don't necessarily agree with that, or that had me confused for a while until I found the answer. Do you have any
Okay.
examples?
Okay, yeah. No, I do. It is a big one. So like
I bet.
I think I think as people who come from very different backgrounds, I think you and I can agree that like killing people is wrong and
Right.
that
Right.
things of like lying and stealing is wrong. But then you get into things of like purity culture, and that's such a gray line, and
Yeah.
I think for me, like that was always that's been the hard one, is like trying to understand that and seeing where that goes. So things of
Right.
like, masturbation or just sex before marriage in general,
Right.
where I think like it definitely does seem like it's a very like there's tons of research on like both ends of
Right.
those topics. And like I think that's always just been kind of a big thing that I've struggled with, just because I remember um so when you're Catholic, like you can do these things called examinations of conscience, which is when you just kind of think about all the things that all the sins you've committed,
Oh no.
essentially. I
Yeah.
know it sounds bad, but the point is so that you
Right.
can go
Like
into
reflection.
it's reflection so that you can go into confession. Do you know what confession is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like the step before confession, where it's
Got it.
like, let me think what I'm going to say to, the priest and really kind of gather my thoughts. But sometimes I think things of that when, especially with the ideas of sex, where like you'll have on both sides, oh, it's a normal thing to masturbate, or, it's a normal thing to like fantasize or to like deal with those kinds of things. And then you have from the church side, like, no, like that's not how this works. And, that's like kind of not God's will, but you're using your own at that point and being selfish. And I remember, I think during an examination of conscience, it was at kind of a retreat I was at, and I remember they were kind of giving examples of like certain sins you could, you would commit and things that you could bring up, and so it was things of like, lying and cheating, stealing, but then you got to things of like, again, purity culture, which I think is just, you know, I just it's just weird,
Right.
and it kind of was like I don't I don't think it's I don't think it's as bad as we make it out to be,
Right.
and
Right.
I think that's kind of the thing that a lot of people struggle with, but they don't want to openly admit. You know,
Totally.
um,
Totally.
like it's easy for me to be in a Bible study and for people to be like, well, what did what things do you need to work on? Oh, I need to like learn to respect my parents more, or I need to, I need to like make sure I keep praying and being consistent with that. But it's never things of like, I don't know, like, am I dealing with feelings of lust or love?
Right.
What even is like lust compared
Right.
to love, and
Right.
everybody has different definitions for that, and it's not really clearly stated in the Bible that
Right.
like, this is inherently wrong. It was just kind of up to interpretation, and like I can see why it's wrong if used in the wrong context,
Right.
and like if you're using it to, again, intention is huge, like
Right. Right.
things of that, like like
Right.
now, like the way I see it is, um like I don't think and I used to be like that, like I kind of I guess I felt judgmental of others when they would be having sex before marriage, or
Yeah.
just because it was like what I was taught, and it
Right.
wasn't like,
Right.
but at the same time, because I wasn't exposed to any of those experiences, it's also kind of gotten me like scared of intimacy and things of
Yeah.
like that, of like, well,
Yeah.
how do I know, is this lust or love, or
Right.
what, like, who is this person to me, and like
Yeah.
things of, well, I'm staring at my ceiling and it's late at night and I have to go to bed because I have to work tomorrow. I could meditate for like 2 hours, but then only get 3 hours of sleep, or I can just do the thing,
Right.
and then
Right.
that'll put me to bed instantly. And
Right.
it's like, what how do I go about this? And then it's the
Right.
same thing, so like growing up, it was kind of the same concept of like, how should I view things of like pornography,
Right.
how is like, because I've always heard it was like, it's like you get, almost felt like it was like you get one hit and then you're addicted, and then
Yeah.
you're
It
like
just all
screwed
it
for
takes
the
is
rest
once.
of your life.
Right. Right.
and and it and it's still a process for me to like try
Yeah.
and like kind of learn like, no, this is okay,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
in moderation, you know,
Yeah.
it's okay, and it's just
Right.
it's trying to figure, you know, out things like sexually
Totally.
and see, and these are the things that I don't think get talked about a lot, and I think what really did it for me, was, so in the Catholic Church, there's like I, as we mentioned, it's just think about it like a fraternity where like you
Mhm.
have like different chapters around like the city or like surrounding states. And so kind of like your head of the chapter, the president, if you will, would be like the bishop.
Right.
So our bishop was at the time it was like Bishop Bransfield, Michael Bransfield, and so he was someone I kind of looked up to as like a
Yeah.
I was pretty big in like you know religion class and
Yeah.
doing well in all of the tests and
Yeah.
interested in the faith and you know I would go to like certain banquets like to represent our school or something like that with him with like you know parents it was with like kids all around the state you know it was like the highest achievers in the school and so I'd see him a lot is what I'm saying in terms of like he would come around often to see us or I was also an altar server so I would serve with him from time to time and he was just someone I really admired and then when I left for college I remember it was freshman year, and I think we were around fall break, and I was just sitting with my family at some restaurant here in town, and they were like, "Hey, did you hear what happened to Bransfield?" And I was like, "No, what happened to Bransfield?" And they were like, "He got excommunicated." I was like, "Why'd he get excommunicated?"
Whoa.
If you look this up, like, there's a Washington Post article on this. This is
Whoa.
fascinating. It was things of like embezzlement, um,
What?
things of I guess buying gifts for like young seminarians to like
Whoa.
and like kind of you know pleasuring himself in front of the seminary like so like
Whoa.
the stereotype of like you know Catholics and like you know
Right.
and the having you know
Man,
sexual
that sucks.
boys it's like that was one and that like shot me because I was like, this is and what's scary too is it's like I've served with this man. Like I've shook
Right.
this man's hand like several times.
Right.
You know, he
Yeah.
confirmed me, which confirmation is like one of the sacraments of initiation, which is like a big think about it like being initiated into a fraternity. It's like
Right.
one of the same things of like confirmation is so like the root word is confirm. So it's
Yeah.
like when you're baptized as a baby, like that's your introductory, that's like your first step in the Catholic world, but you don't really
Right.
know what's going on. You're an
Right.
infant, you know?
Right.
And so, but confirmation happens like your senior year of high school when it's like, hey, you've like attended all these classes, you've been through the ringer, I guess, with Catholic school even. So you have like a good knowledge of faith. Now it's time to like put that to good use. And so he would, you know, confirm us. And so things of like him giving off that send off of like, yes, I think, you know, you're ready to go and do God's will and whatever that is. And then knowing like a year later or 2 years
Yeah.
later after that happened, like
And it
this,
may have been happening at that time. Like, it
yeah.
could have
And the
very well
thing
have
was,
been
is like
happening.
this, and like the whole thing, it was, I guess it was stuff that happened years ago, but it was swept under the rug. And so, but if you look it up, it's like the Washington Post article on him or something. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And then so there was just like, well, if that happened, and if that was like the highest authority, like
Right.
now what do I do? Like
Right. And
that, you know?
yeah, and also one of the things that bother me the most about things like purity culture is in many religions or denominations of religions, the punishment is simply not befitting the crime, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're not gonna tell me that a young guy following what biology is telling him to do in his room by himself, at 10 PM is as bad as what he was doing to other people,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so many denominations, especially when you get into evangelical and fundamentalist Christianity, like Baptist,
Yeah.
many Baptist sects, they say, like, watching porn is disgusting. Jerking off is disgusting. Like,
Yeah.
touching yourself, that is gross. That's a sin. You need to apologize for doing that. Ew.
Yeah.
Don't talk about it. Don't tell anyone except Jesus, who already knows about it. You know,
Yeah.
you need to apologize. Whereas, like, one, no, it does not make you gross. It
Yeah.
doesn't make you gross. If what you're doing is your business. But also, there is such a what's the word I'm looking for? A spectrum of what that even means. So one day, years ago, I was dating somebody. I was already an atheist, but he had just
Yeah.
graduated from a Christian school,
Mhm.
and he said, "I need to tell you something that might view how you look at me." And I was like,
Mhm.
"Oh, no." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And he goes, please just, like, hear me out before, like, casting judgment and deciding what you're gonna do." And I was like, "What did this person do?" And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "I," and he literally was, like, crying. He was like,
Yeah.
"I watch porn." And I was
Yeah.
like, "Okay, what kind of porn?" Because 'Cause I'm thinking, this reaction, it is something that is
As
going,
severe as it could. Yeah.
like, the cops have already talked to this guy.
Yeah.
He's going away for a long time. And he goes,
Yeah.
"Just porn." And I was like, You mean you're just telling me you watch porn?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Everybody's of age?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "There's, like, not animal stuff going on?" He's like, "Oh my god, no, of course not." Yeah, and I was like, "So you're," and then I realized it was a very sensitive topic to him, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Thank you so much for telling me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Um, did everybody in the stuff that you watched look like it was consensual? Like, or did they look like they were, human trafficked?" And he's like,
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, it looked pretty consensual." And I was like, "Okay. In my opinion, that's okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't think there's any, now, obviously, if you're watching, like, torture porn, or if you're watching stuff
Yeah.
that, like, it doesn't look like everybody's having a great time, or with people that don't look old enough, that's a totally different scenario. But he was
Mhm.
sobbing over the fact that he
Yeah.
thought I was gonna break up with him because he had looked at porn before in the
Yeah.
past. It wasn't even recent. It had just been such a cloud over his head. And he was 23 or 24 years old. We're
Yeah.
not talking about a 16-year-old. Um,
No,
and that's
that was kind of sort of the same age
yeah,
when I had that, like, same moment too, and,
right. And
it
it is biology,
and
you know?
it's very interesting, and I remember I was talking to, my therapist at the time about it, and I was like, I don't know how to handle this, like, I don't know if this is, you know, I oh, I don't mean to, like, be like a real downer, but, like,
No, no, this is an
what
important
happened
conversation.
what
Yeah,
no, what happened was, like, I was never given the talk, like, growing up about sex,
yeah,
and I think I was going to at one point in time, but then, like, a lot of family stuff happened where, like, my father passed away, and
oh, I'm
so
sorry.
oh, no, it's okay, um, but I think that was just supposed to be, like, around the time it was, and then it
Right,
just never really did,
right,
and it's not even my parents' fault, it's just
right,
how it happened,
right.
and so, naturally, I think how I got a lot of my sex education, or honestly lack thereof, was through, like, Catholic school and Catholic church.
Yeah,
I think I vividly remember, oh, this is well, I guess we'll go on this tangent. When I
sure.
started in high school, I was a freshman in high school, but I was still part of St. Francis Catholic Church. So that's or Catholic school. So they had the
Right,
school in addition to the church.
right,
They decided a couple years before I went into the high school that they were going to build it, but the high school itself wasn't really a high school. It it was like two so we had like these two houses that basically housed all of our uniforms for like spares in case kids needed them. And I guess they cleared those out
Okay.
and then that became the high school. So the
Okay.
high school, so like there was this regular school building, and then right
Right.
across from it were like these two housing complex unit things.
Okay.
They were only like two stories up, two
Right.
floors, and that was the high school. And
Hmm.
we did not have we did not have a senior class because the senior or the oldest student that we had at the time did not wasn't a senior. There were only, I'm trying to remember.
There was literally just no seniors? Like, it was just a really
Yeah,
small
there
school?
were only 9 people in this entire high school. It was
Oh,
6 freshmen, including myself,
wow.
2 sophomores, including my twin sister, and then a junior, and then that was it. Like, there was no, like, senior. It was,
That's
wow.
odd.
It was
I
it
mean,
was It was
did
it was that was a whole thing, but, like, I remember because usually around, like, freshman year of high school, that's when you're doing health class, and so,
yeah,
like I said, and I
yeah.
remember I think the only thing we did was, like, we had, like, the tiniest conversation on, like, theology of the body and how your body is a temple and how, like, you should respect it, and then that was it, like, that was all I got.
That's
And
what you
then,
get,
like,
yeah.
everything else was basically through, like, certain, like, retreats here and there and things of what I've heard, and I think I don't know, it is, it's a
And it always
very
starts with you getting married. That's always step 1, is, like, you
yeah,
get married,
yeah,
but
and,
before
like,
then, don't even think about it.
but then it's like, if that's the case, then I think nowadays, even in the, like, just the modern era of just simply having couples living together, like, is often, frowned upon because it's just like they're already live like that. They need to
Living
do
in
that when they're
sin.
married, and it's just like I. It's also just hard considering the economic state right now,
Right,
and just
right?
like there's just there's a lot to unpack. I remember it was basically that, and then the rest of our, like, I think that was like for some theology class because our actual health class wasn't really a health class. We just went over to the school gymnasium and then we just vented to the gym teacher about how much we didn't like whatever we were dealing with at the high school. It
It was more
only
like a
lasted
therapy
for like
session almost.
it only lasted for like 2 years, I think, and then they closed it.
Oh,
And
the
then I
school?
went the high school,
Oh,
yes,
got it, got it.
the high school section. And so I went from high school, like a private high school, to a public school, like freshman to sophomore year, and that was a difference of like 9 students to like over 2,000 kids, I think,
I was gonna
and
say, I
it
bet that
was
was
just
culture shock.
yeah, it was bizarre, and there was just, like, a lot going on, and then I think just as time went on, there was just, there wasn't really a whole lot of, like, questioning back then because I was still, sort of under, my parents' roof, and it was
Yeah,
just like, "Yeah, I'll do this," and the
yeah,
choir stuff was a lot of fun. I didn't really get, like, the whole sex thing until probably, like, end of senior year, like, start of
yeah.
college of, like, trying to figure things out, and it was really just because now I'm, like, completely on my own. How do I, you know, how do I make this work, and what am I supposed to do about it?
Right.
And I brought all of this stuff to try and go full circle. I tried to bring all of this stuff to my therapist, and she was like, "You just have to make a decision." And I was like, What?" She goes, "Yeah, because knowing you, it's like if you do more research and if you try to ask more people about what kind of advice you should get, you're just going to end up more confused because there's both sides to the
Interesting.
argument, right? So,
Yeah,
like, there's just as
interesting.
many people who think like masturbation and porn can be a healthy thing as it is a bad thing. And
Right,
she was like, you're old enough to make that decision. So, like,
right.
maybe write down your values and see what that entails and see
Right.
where that goes.
Right.
And then she also recommended things of like, ethical porn and things of like supporting creators that way and like
Right.
just
I love the idea of supporting creators. That's
I,
great.
I guess
Yeah.
I mean I don't know what else to really. I mean it is supporting
Totally.
technically, and
Well,
they
and
need it to make
well,
money and
and when you get religion involved in that sort of thing, there's no nuance allowed. And
no
there's so much nuance involved in the topic. For example, too much porn can be bad.
yeah
Studies have shown that if you're
yeah
addicted to pornography, it can harm your marriage, it can harm your
yeah
relationships, it can harm your psyche. Like
yes
an
absolutely
addiction to anything, even if that thing in itself is not a harmful thing,
yeah
can be harmful. You can be addicted to your phone, you can be addicted to
yeah
sex, to porn, to like anything. And so I can see from the perspective of we don't want you to taint your outlook on what women look like, what women are like to
yeah
be with by watching porn. But it's never explained that way. Instead, it's just
no
you're gross if you watch porn, as
yeah
opposed to
and
porn
that
offers
and
an
that's the problem I
yeah,
have with like purity culture itself
right.
is if you
Right.
really look at it and like the idea of being pure and saving yourself for marriage, it's supposed to be an act of like vulnerability because
Yeah.
it's like, hey, like this is who I really am, like,
Yeah.
and this is like an important part. And so naturally, I think when you're having things of like sex, it's vulnerable because everything's out in the open, both in the physical and the mental
Yeah.
space, because it's like this is how it is, and that to me is like very pretty. Like I think that's
Yeah.
very cool to like
Definitely.
have that in like marriage. I just think that they don't do a good job at
Right.
all, like saying that and explaining like this is what
Yes.
it could be, or
Yes.
things of like again intention. Like, are you
Right.
just watching this just to like as a means to an end of like get this over with? I don't care
Right.
about this person, but because then
Right.
if that's the case, then that's a problem.
Right.
But
And
things,
the other oh,
yeah.
sorry. Continue.
But I was gonna say just things of like again knowing moderation, understanding that they're like
Right.
human beings, and you
Right.
know not being afraid. Essentially, too, like the other thing too was like eventually I was so bogged down with this where like the therapist like that kind of helped, and then also um, I went to a psychic about it at some
Yeah.
point because I was like, yeah. And that's the other thing is like I think God shows himself off in different ways for
Yeah.
different people. And
Yeah.
so although they might classify God as one thing, I still see it both ways. And so it was just like I'm like I still like there's part of me that worries like if I like if this is happening, like I'm straying off of some sort of path of where I should be. And it's like, no, this is a very normal thing. Like
Right.
you're not
Right.
gonna stray off of some sort of path if you're doing this. Like it's totally fine.
Yes.
Um,
And I also think there's a huge difference between please don't watch porn, it's not good for you, versus when religions also tie personal value into it.
yeah.
That's where I got the most messed up with purity culture. Is they told me not only is premarital sex bad, you want to share
Mhm,
that moment with your spouse, it's something special you can give them, but
mhm.
also you're used goods and you're gross and you're lucky if a man will have you if you're not a virgin when you get married. Like there's a big difference
That's
between porn
yeah,
is bad for you versus also your value is so low. And so what happens, at least with women, I don't know the experience with men, is even on your wedding night you don't know who you are anymore because you just gave away your value. Even if you do everything right, even if you wait till the day that you get married, I've talked to so many people who, after their honeymoon, they're like,
yeah.
I've lost all of my value. When I go back to church on Sunday, everyone will know that I'm not pure anymore because I got married and I'm lost. Who am I? What am I worth now?
That's so interesting because
Mhm.
I guess this is like sort of prejudging, but like I've also kind of come to the consensus that I think a lot of like Christian, there's always that stereotype of Christians getting married really, really, really young,
Yes.
and I
Yes.
think it's just so that, we can boink and be
Yep.
okay in the eyes of God when we do
Yep.
it. And I just, again, I think the intention of that, it's like God God sees through that, you know? And it's
Yes.
like
Yeah.
at that point he's probably like, just don't even worry about the label, you know? And
Right. Right.
and then at that point too, it's like you're doing it out of spite of other people.
Right.
And the thing is especially with God and Jesus, it's like I just think it's so ironic that like in the Bible, Jesus is always like testing the Pharisees or like the biblical scholars of the law. And he's saying, actually, that's not what that reads. It says more like this. And they're like, what? And I just
How
feel like
dare you?
we're sort of in the modern era of that, you know, where we have all of these theologians and people telling you this is what the Bible says. But when really, like, I feel like Jesus and everything is like, actually, I think it says this, and
Yeah.
we're just like, what? And it just kind of proves. I think we're just. I think as a culture, as a Christian culture, I think we're just running in circles, and we're not moving forward. And I think
Right.
part of that
Right.
is because people are scared of that kind of change, you
They
know,
are.
and
Yeah.
which is ironic because there's all sorts of fear in the Bible: fear of change, fear of neglect, you know, all sorts of that.
Right.
And you just like, but that's how it works. Like that's how faith grows. Again, it's like I don't really know what's coming up, but I'm guessing this is the next thing for me to do. So
Yeah. Yeah.
now, yeah, it's
Well, and studies have shown oftentimes that people who save themselves for marriage, the marriage doesn't work out
yeah,
because you don't get to know each other. And you think,
yeah,
what do you think God would want more? You to get married at 19 and divorced at 21 and married at 22 and
yeah,
divorced at 24, or have sex with your partner that you're in love with a couple of times and then get married and be married for
yeah,
50, 60 years? Like
yeah,
what do you think would honor him
yeah,
more?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I just I wish I wished a lot that like you know the church would do, and even with other things of like Christian media and things of like movies and TV shows or just I don't know. It's just, they want to stay in their bubble, and I don't like that because I thought the whole point of this was we're supposed to go out and spread the good news, but you don't have to do that in the way of like cramming Jesus down everybody's throats. You know, it's
Yeah.
also through your actions and how you choose to treat people,
Yeah.
and I just don't think we do a good job of that right now.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Yes.
people always say, "Oh, Jesus is going to come back real soon," and it's like to me, I feel like if he does come back, he would be incredibly disappointed,
You'd
just
be
because
yes.
of like how we're acting and like you know, no one wants to. I don't know. And then there's just things too of I I guess well I don't know. I'm trying to like cover different points here,
Yeah.
but like there's things too of like when it was cool working at like a Baptist church. So I guess for context, because I told you earlier, like
Yeah.
when I started out of college, I was needing some like mixing experience in audio, and so I took up a gig at a Baptist church. And that was a new experience for me because I've never been in a Baptist church service before, and it was just
Man, welcome. Welcome.
it was something. It just felt like it was the lamest concert ever.
Yes.
I don't know how else to
No,
say it.
that's accurate. That's
It's
accurate.
just like there's no like
Yep.
they're always saying like, "Oh, you got to be excited for the Lord," and I'm just looking at all these cameras, and people are just as still as statues,
Yeah. Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And like you'll always have the pastor saying, "Hey, I know that we're here to just like you know check off a box, but this is more than that." Well, then if that's the case, then I would think people would be more excited than they are right now.
Right.
I don't know. And then there's things of like
Yes.
the baptism stuff of like, oh well, you know, like a 6-year-old will go up or a 9-year-old will go up and be like, "Have you accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior?" And they just go, "Yes." And like clearly they've not paid taxes or anything. Like
Yes.
I don't know. Like there were just things of like that's it. Like you can just say yes, and then
That's it. That's it.
that's it. Like there's no,
That's the whole
and
thing.
like that's also the big differential from like Catholicism is as I understand it, like Southern Baptist and a lot of the other denominations, like it's built on strictly faith, whereas Catholicism is built on faith and good works.
Right.
So it's how do you act on that faith? What do you choose to do with it? Again,
Right.
what's your intention? And then how
Right.
are you going to use that intention to like inspire others and to do other things? Because to me,
Right.
when I hear that, I just feel like, I could murder somebody, but hey, I said I believed in Jesus, so that means I'm good. Like I can
Well,
still go to,
yeah,
it's
well,
just
I
like,
joke with people all the time. I'm like, when people ask me like, if you're an atheist, what keeps you from like raping and murdering people? And my answer is
who
always,
asked
well,
that?
well, my answer is always, if religion is the only thing keeping you
Yeah,
from like,
that's
just stay
freaking
religious, please.
scary.
Like, yeah, because they
Who
think, if you don't think you go to hell afterward, well, then why don't you just do whatever you want? And I'm like, I do whatever I want. I just don't want to kill people. Like the end. I just don't want to kill anybody.
and that's the thing. Like that's what I don't understand about people. And the thing too is like we're supposed to like love one another, as Jesus taught us. And the thing is Jesus was always like very forward and very, positive towards outcast people
Yeah.
like Gentiles and Samaritans and
Mhm.
etc. And like they were ostracized from society,
Yeah.
and I just think that we're not really doing a good job holding up our side
Right.
of the bargain and
Right.
following his example in that.
Right.
It's annoying.
Yes. Yes.
It's really annoying,
It
and like
is.
it really bothered me because it's just things of like you go to the Sunday school classes. I went to one just to see what it was, and it's like you could just I just felt like I could tell. It's like they're being honest enough to where it gets by, to
Yes.
where but they still wanna maintain, like, their image or, like, the status that they
Yes.
have
Yes.
because and it's
And then
just
they're
like
gonna
the
leave
thing.
here, and then they're gonna scream at a barista for not having peppermint mochas anymore
Yeah,
because it's
man,
not
like, it's
December.
not it's not worth it, like, what are you
Right.
doing, It's
Right.
just and the thing too is I don't know. It almost does. It feels like it's just like a label thing of like, well, this is what I am, and this is who I am now, and
Yeah.
this is how things are gonna be. Like there's so much judgmental, and you have Christians out there that are like trying to push boundaries. Like one of the big things I'm a musician at heart, and so there's one song out there called "A Prayer," and it's by a guy or a group called King's Kaleidoscope, and they're really big in like the
That's a cool
Christian, like
name. I like that name.
the CCM
I'm gonna write
contemporary
it down.
Christian music world. It's a really cool song because it feels like super vulnerable, and it's especially vulnerable because he says a curse word in there. He says like fuck of all words, and the reason, but if you look at the context behind it, it's so powerful and it's such a dope song. But what ruins it is that you have people that'll listen to it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, he said fuck or a curse word or something," and then
Blaspheme.
they got like so there's like the Dove Awards, which is like the Christian version of the Grammys.
I had no
Um,
idea.
you had no idea? Yeah, there's like
No.
so it's like the Christian version of the Grammys.
I'm writing
So
these all
King's
of this stuff down.
Kaleidoscope got like banned from that. They
What?
don't get like I don't think they get well, maybe now they do. Maybe it's gotten better, but like at the time, it was like Christian radio wasn't gonna play them just because of this whole thing. It was a huge controversy in like the CCM world.
Interesting.
But that's and so you have things of like that where you have Christians that are like challenging beliefs or like musicians that are challenging these beliefs, but it's like no one wants to hear that because it's uncomfortable. And so
Right.
it's the same thing too of like I just think that it's also funny, like anything with mainstream media, there's like a Christian version of it. So like there's like
Yes.
there's like an Uptown Funk, so like Bruno Mars, Uptown Funk. There's like Toby Mac did a version of that that's like eerily
What?
similar or
What?
things like that. Yeah, no, seriously. And then things of like Christian media of like movies and how it portrays God and like it's just like no one the people who write this stuff, it's like it's almost like they live in their own world. Like it's not how it's not how the world works. And
Well, and
I
also
don't
you're
know.
thinking, like, okay, we have a Christian version of Uptown Funk. Okay, we have a Christian version of Kids Bop now. We
Yeah,
have a Christian version of this movie and that movie. But are we still treating gay people bad? Are we still
yeah.
treating, you know what I mean? Like, are we still not
And my
talking
thing
about
is I thought we were supposed to try and spread the good news and go out and well, we're staying in our bubble. Like, what do
right,
we to
right,
stop
exactly.
this? You know?
Exactly. It's just
It's
like it's like everybody has that friend on Facebook who, like, posts, like, hot takes, and
yeah,
everyone is like, "Yes." But you're like, if you really wanted to post a hot take, you would post it someplace that isn't safe. You would post it
yeah,
someplace where everyone doesn't already agree with you if you really wanted to
yeah,
post that hot take. But
yeah.
instead, you're posting it in your little bubble of people that already think the same way you do.
You're
So they're
surrounding
all just
yourself
validating
by like
you.
a bunch of yes men or yes
Yes,
women, and
exactly.
like you can't. You're supposed to be with people that challenge your way of thinking so that you can
Yeah.
grow from it. That's what Jesus
Yes.
did with everybody. Like
Yes. Yes. Yes.
you
And
gotta do
so
the same thing. It's
it,
not
it,
it's not rocket surgery or whatever it's called. Like it's
it ain't rocket surgery, ladies and
yeah,
gentlemen.
it's one of my professors always said that in college,
It's not
and
rocket.
it's stuck
And
with me ever since. But like it's I don't understand, and
yeah.
it was it's always it's just like and I remembered like when I would always be going there to do the broadcast and the audio stuff. It just felt like I just couldn't hear someone talk for like 45 minutes straight.
Too much. It's too much.
It's too
It
much.
is too much. I can't do
It's
it.
see, and I'm not okay. Like whatever you believe, fine. But I like Catholicism better because I'm at least like sitting, standing, kneeling. Like my
Yeah.
body is somewhat moving. And
Yes.
the cool thing too, and I think what people often uh, don't realize is like there's I don't know. To me, I think it provides like a closer connection to God to me personally than it
Yeah.
did like doing audio at some Baptist church where they were playing some, like
Yeah.
concert-esque music.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes we hear God through silence,
Ooh,
and
interesting.
it's often hard getting advice on how to be perfect from imperfect people. It just doesn't make any
Right.
sense, And so to
Yeah.
me, like oftentimes maybe I don't agree with everything that's, the priest is saying or something, but I often will like stay like 15, 20 minutes after church just sitting in the pew and just like, okay, like now that all the noise is gone, like what is God trying to tell me today?
Interesting.
Or
Yeah.
something like that. And
Yeah.
and I
And
often oh, go on
well,
ahead.
question for you.
Yeah.
This actually leads that like what you're saying leads perfectly, I feel like, into it. I feel like one of the hallmarks of Catholicism is there is a lot of, and I do not mean this word disrespectfully, I just can't think
No,
of a different word.
no.
There's a lot of performative aspects of
Yes.
Catholicism. There's a
Yes.
lot of prayers that are memorized.
Yes.
There's like the rosary, the
Yes.
idea of the rosary.
Yes.
Do you, in your opinion, are those things like the memorized prayers, there's a lot of call and response, I feel like, in
Mhm.
Catholicism.
Mhm.
I've been to a few masses, but not too
Yes.
many. Do you feel like that is necessary, or do you think that's more for like comfort and ease? Like, do you think that God needs those, or do you think those are more for the familial, fraternal comfort aspect? Like, what do you
I'm
think
gonna say it's
job
the
those
latter.
do?
I'm gonna say it's the latter because usually when you do things of like the rosary and things, not always,
Yeah.
but it's always good to have that kind of stuff with a group and to do that stuff with a group. And the same thing with church itself.
It's more for
And
the
I think
humans
that's
than for God.
what was that?
Do you think it's more for the humans than it is for God?
Mm, I feel like that's a little different.
Well, I mean, like, you're doing it to express how you feel about God and your belief in
Mhm.
God, but the actual activities and actions and repetitive nature themselves are for the humans, I guess?
Some parts, yes, and other parts, no. I'll try my best to explain. So
Sure,
things of
yeah,
like saying, amen and the rosary. The idea is that you're praying to God, and I
right.
think having that. in addition to like the communal bond, I think that makes your prayer worth more and a lot like stronger. Um, there's a lot of aspects in Catholicism where the consecration happens, which is the process of the bread and wine becoming the body and blood of Jesus. That's what it's called. That or the transfiguration. They're kind of like they're eerily similar. I think those like in saying those prayers and things that's important. And I think it also just shows the aspect of it. It's not to show like any sort of symbolism. As Catholics, we do believe that the bread and wine is truly like Jesus Christ present in the Eucharist.
Mm.
Which is a whole other thing as to why I get upset when we just go up there and the priest goes, the body of Christ, and we just say amen, and then just, you know, eat Jesus that way without like really giving it much thought as to like how serious of a moment this is, you know? And
Yeah.
like that really like frustrates me. And the idea of like you can only receive Jesus this way if you're Catholic. It's like why is that? I thought Jesus was for everybody. And it's like, well, the alternative would be like, well, then they can become Catholic. And it's like, sure, but then I just feel like we're putting a label on it, almost as if we're doing like, you know,
Yeah.
becoming a Baptist is just being baptized. And it's just that's not how it is. And so
Right.
I think having silent prayer is important. Things of like adoration. I know I think you had someone on here that talked about
Yeah.
adoration before.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So adoration is like when you have like the Eucharist and it's at the center of the altar and you're basically looking essentially at the face of Jesus and you see it. And I think having that as like silent prayer, especially with other people around you, is very helpful because sometimes whether it's through guilt and stuff, and again, as we've talked about, like there are some things that are worth letting go, but then other things where life is just like shit sometimes, and so you know emotions can run high, and I think always having like someone beside you or you know
Yeah.
something just like comforting you is always helpful too, in
Yeah.
addition to having Christ ourselves. God made us to be very social creatures, and so I guess I am kind of backpedaling, but I would say it's
No.
honestly kind of both, in terms of like um, we don't do church for the community aspect of it, although that's a big part of it. That's not the focal
It's
point.
helpful. Yeah.
Absolutely helpful, but the main point of it is to just kind of sit with God. And again, priests are different. There's different priests everywhere in different dioceses. They all bring different perspectives. So maybe you can take something from like a priest and then maybe you can't. Like sometimes what I would do is they have like the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, or the USCCB, which is like the acronym, and they have like all the
Interesting.
meetings for each day. And so what I would do sometimes is like I'll read through it, and it's like, how does this apply to my life? Because what the priest was talking
Interesting.
about is just general, like you know, this is what everybody should maybe do today, or for the week or the month, or something like that. But
Yeah.
again, like faith at its core is your personal relationship with Jesus. Emphasis on the word personal. And
Right.
so you have to see like how what is God trying to tell me today? And I
Yeah.
remember I was looking at, you know, adoration and I was looking at the Eucharist and it was just kind of like a, you know, a hey man, like no matter what happens, like we're still okay, right? And I don't know. There was kind of like a reaffirming yes. So
Awesome.
although I don't believe in the things of like purity culture, that's really been the only thing I've been like
That's like your biggest
knocked up
beef.
about.
Yeah.
Everything else is still prominent, and it's like I I haven't gone to church as often as I know I should, but like I think things too of like people people don't really account for like
Well,
life gets in the way, and like
well,
I
and like intention is everything, like you said. If somebody's just
yes,
going to church to be seen at church, they might as well not go to church,
yeah, 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 yeah,
Or
yeah,
if
yeah.
you're at home and you're praying and you're sitting and you're thinking and you're meditating and you're having a conversation with God,
That's
that may be
way
more
better.
valuable
I to
than
me, that would be way better, and I
yeah,
understand because my thing is there everybody will always say like, "Oh, well, nothing compares to, like, physically receiving Jesus," and
right,
I can understand that if we took it more seriously,
right.
but I'm not gonna like, I can't believe that if we're just gonna stay there and you're just gonna bow your head and say amen, and then they give you Jesus, and then that's it, and then
Right.
that's the other thing. There's,
You're
like,
like,
these things
"Speaking of
called
which"
there's these things. So there, it was mentioned, and this happens all the time. They call them like R&R Catholics, um, which
what's
means
that?
receive and run. So like, what happens is like you don't have to stay for the end of the service after you receive Jesus, which means you can go up there, receive Jesus, and then just leave if you wanted, because they open the doors anyway. I don't know why they do
They
that.
let you out, so
They let you out, which it's like okay. But like again, I just think it undermines the value and the
right.
importance of what this is. And then
Yes.
at that point, to me, it seems like you don't even care about
Right,
anything leading up to that moment. It's
right.
just like I'm here to receive Jesus and that's it. And then the second you do, you can just leave. I don't like that.
Checking
I,
it off
I
my
think
box.
yeah, and it goes back to like the freaking Baptist thing too of like they have the same issue, and that's the thing is like people though we oh my gosh this makes me so frazzled. It's like people don't. The Catholics always want to judge Baptists, and Baptists always want to judge Catholics,
Everybody,
and yet we
everybody.
have the same exact issues. They're just like presented differently.
They're just
You
different
know?
fonts. The same
Yeah,
issues, different fonts.
yeah. Which means to me, like as a whole in Christianity, we're not progressing like we
Right,
should be, and
right.
I don't, and that like frustrates the hell out of me.
Yes, yes.
Um,
I always say that
I
when you know 2 different people that have the same issues, you should put them in a room together and have them meet each other so that they can complain afterward about the
yeah.
exact same things they do,
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
"Oh, well, that person complains all the time. Have you heard yourself? You complain all the time." Or, "That
Yeah,
person isn't a real Christian."
you just
But
complained right now.
you do the same thing,
Please.
like, you're doing and so I think that's it's so funny that the things that so many religions judge each other for, they are just
Mhm.
as guilty of, like, they do the same thing or they don't do the same thing, like, they
Yeah,
are as bad. That's hilarious. I get heated about that too.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't make any sense to me, and I just I don't know. I like, and my thing is the whole premise of knowing Jesus and receiving Jesus in more ways than one. It's like just being kind to others.
Literally, yeah.
Saying like
Yep.
like hey like I'm just being nice, even if you know what their beliefs are. It's not like you should like you might learn something from them, you
Right.
know? Like not and I'm not even trying to be like all preachy about it, but
No,
it's like
it's true.
why, why did I kind of know your story. So like weren't you on like shrooms or something? And then you
Hell yeah.
yeah. Um
Hell
and
yeah.
then that's how it started. But
Well, that's how it ended, more like.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Like,
So
that was, like, the final straw, but I'd
I
had
see,
questions for a while,
I see. But
Yeah.
things of like when you like, I don't know. I just wish people were more honest too. When
Yeah.
you were to ask those questions, that you would get more honest answers of like, I don't know. Because sometimes I
Yeah.
would ask like, um, a good friend of mine is also a priest, and so sometimes I would be like, "Hey, like this was what I was like, what I've been struggling with like, if Jesus is like, if only as Catholics we can receive Jesus in this manner, which I feel like is like the purest form ever. Like, why can't that be given to everybody?" And sometimes the answers would be like, "I don't know. That's more of like a philosophical question," and it's like
Yeah.
I just thought that this would be more black and white, and
Right.
that's the thing, and that's what's scary about faith because it's not black and white. It's
Right.
gray
Right.
because at this point, no one knows.
Nobody
No
knows.
one knows, you
And
know?
if they tell you they know for sure, be aware of that person.
Yeah,
Yes.
you don't. But that's where your faith is the strongest, and that's where it can mature is by asking those
Yes.
questions. And
And not being afraid of the answers you get.
yeah,
Because if you ask the questions and then you go la 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 to the answer and then you're like, "Ooh,
yeah.
I'm still a Catholic," or
And
"Yay,
then
I'm still a
also
Baptist."
once you receive those answers, being able to discern, you know, how does this apply to me? Does it
Right.
apply to me? And if it doesn't, that's okay. Like, I at
Yeah.
least know this is like knowledge now. Maybe I don't agree with it or I don't use it all the time, but knowing that I have it and knowing that maybe I can share it with someone else who would
Yep.
benefit from it.
Yep.
Oh yeah, like that's cool, you know? And so
Yeah. Absolutely.
it's just yeah,
Yeah.
that I think that's where it's at. I have another like I have a bunch of other like Catholic school stories too.
You should
That
start a podcast where you just share
uh,
your Catholic school stories and you just invite people to tell their Catholic school
oh,
stories.
so what's cool too is like I have a group of friends back home, and we always get together. When we went to public school, there was always this lunch table dedicated to the St. Francis people. It was known as like the St. Francis table because we were all from St. Francis, and then we
That's funny.
migrated over to. Some of them migrated after middle school. I migrated after that first year of high school, but
Yeah.
they were all sort of conjoined together. And so we've always been in touch ever since then. And every time we come back home, we just talk different stories of the things that have happened since then. And
You
like
should start a podcast.
the stories never get old. It's great.
You should start one. Like, all of you should start a podcast about,
Yeah,
like, your sides of the same story, like, the different, takes you have of the same
yeah,
situations and, like, what you
it's
remember.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
There was some crazy times for sure. But again, I think like all of those experiences, it kind of culminates into who you are today, you know?
Totally.
And and
Totally.
and I think the thing too is like the way I see it is God has already had our lives planned out from the very beginning. Like I to me, I feel like it was like, like he planned that you and I would have this conversation millions upon millions of
Yeah.
years ago before we like he knew I would probably jerk off this morning or you know what I'm saying? Like it's not it's not like I feel like if it were a problem, then like there would
He'd
be
have struck
more.
you with lightning. He'd have been like,
I
"Zzz, bzz."
guess, and that's the thing is like there's more. There's just like it's a culture thing, and the thing too is again that's more of like a cultural relationship with Jesus when really we should be looking more for a personal relationship with Jesus. There's a difference there. I think the culture aspect helps with like discovering morals of like right and wrong. But I think once
Yeah.
you reach that point, there just comes a point where you have to ask those questions. You
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
just run away from it. And
Absolutely.
it's not,
Absolutely, because
yeah,
they will not go away. They won't.
yeah,
I can tell you firsthand, those questions never go away.
yeah,
They just get scarier and scarier and scarier
yeah.
until one day you
And then
do
you
shrooms
know,
and you wake up an atheist or somebody answers those questions for you. One of
right.
the 2 things happen.
But I think the thing too is like because of that, I think there's that sense of vulnerability, which many times it like people can see that as weakness, but others I think see it as like very courageous. And I think because of that, you're essentially saying the same thoughts that they've always had, but
Yeah.
too scared to admit them.
Yeah.
And I think because you were being vulnerable in that aspect, you naturally can just grow closer to that person, whether in a relationship or a friendship or even just someone you met on the street. And so I think always that's always kind of my thing is it's just sort of like no matter what happens, like it'll work out somehow. And
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like people are always wanting signs from God of like, God, if you're there, like do this for me, or like, my electricity bill's going out and I can't afford rent this month, but like I know God will take care of me. And I think there's two ways to that because you have people where it's like the world is kind of crumbling around them, and sometimes it does feel like the world's against you. But I also think having faith in God, it's not enough. You need to be like proactive in things. What
Yeah.
can I do to better myself or
Yeah.
better the situation I'm in? I can't just say like, "Oh, God's got me covered for
Yeah.
all of this." And it's not
Yeah.
like God's gonna have an open door immediately through and through, and I can just walk right through and know what I'm
Right.
supposed to do.
Like,
It's
in
just
a marriage, you would never say, like, "Oh, like, my wife's got me or my husband's got me. I don't gotta work on this. This is
yeah,
easy. I don't have to do any effort at all in this
yeah.
relationship. It's just love. That'll get us through."
It's like that with any relationship. It's not even
Right.
just marriage. And I think that's the thing too, is none of none of our signs from God are like ever fully clear. But I think, God never really shows the destination, but he can always show you what the next step is supposed to be.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
depending on how you are and like with how your things, like I can be incredibly stubborn and like I don't know if this is the right thing to do. But then it also just feels like he pretty much axed every other option that I had somehow, which like when I was doing a job search, around here. It's so like having mild cerebral palsy is kind of annoying, especially when you're trying to work in the live event field where it's pretty physically demanding. And
Right.
so things of I was applying to jobs and applying to jobs and I wasn't getting anywhere. And it just felt like I was receiving a lot of pressure from, parents and family, like personally, to where it was just not what, it felt like I wasn't trying hard enough. And then there came a point where like I just remember I was sitting in my car and I just like broke down sobbing because I was like, this is ridiculous. And it was like I'm growing so impatient with this. And like I feel like I've been through enough in my life to where this shouldn't happen. And I don't know
Right.
why it's happening. And
Yeah.
that to me, like that moment is like
Yeah.
the pinnacle of faith in like your relationship. Like that's when that hits. Like that's that's the Jesus moment. And I could say that, oh, well, I decided to put my, selfish desires, I put them aside to focus on God. But that's not really what happened. It was more of, I think God wants to put us through these difficult trials because we can come out on the other side as better people and stronger people of saying, hey, that job interview went well. I didn't get the job, but I know they liked me as a person and to not
Yeah.
take it personally. And that's the kind of lesson, like, there's always a lesson that you get from this kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how it worked. And then
Yeah.
eventually there came a point where it was like, well, this one company reached out to me and this one guy reached out. Maybe if I can explain to them my situation of like, hey, I'm moving to Nashville in like 2 months. I have a place set. I just need money to fund it. And I explained that, and then that's how I got the job I have now. And
That's cool.
and things of that and having the money, it's like then I wouldn't have been able to have met you,
Yeah.
comedy class, or I
Yeah.
wouldn't have been able to do ballroom dancing, or I wouldn't have been able to do skydiving or like any of the other hobbies that I've done. And so maybe and sometimes too like throughout life it's like you'll kind of get subtle signs of like, okay, I think this is where I'm supposed to be. It doesn't mean like you don't have to always like God or even love
Right.
God.
Right.
That's not hate God.
Right.
I'm not like, because that's like the definition of what faith is. It's being
Well,
so frustrated with him that it's
yeah.
like, okay, what do you want me to do now?
Right, right, and, like, there are times where if you think about your parents or your siblings or boyfriends or girlfriends, you get upset with them. You're like, "Why are you
And
doing
where's
this?
that
Why?"
influence coming from?
Yeah.
Is it like, am I being influenced from? Because originally I thought I was going to go to the seminary to become a priest because I thought that's what my
Interesting.
grandmother wanted me to do. And I
Interesting.
remember I was like, it was another moment where I was like, I don't, it just doesn't seem right. Like it doesn't fit. And then I
Right.
talked about it with my mom. And she was like, yeah, don't feel any pressure from that. Like
Yeah, she's like, "That's
you
quite
got
the
to do,
commitment."
you got to do what you got to, what you want to do. And
Yeah.
I think even now where it's sometimes I can tolerate my job, other days I can't. But then I realize, when I'm at the Christmas party, like slightly buzzed, I guess I'll say, and then like other people are around and they're like, hey, like I know it seems like you don't do anything, but you're doing a really good job, like, keep it up,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and,
You
like,
find
just
your
keep at
purpose.
it. And it's things like that where it's like sometimes I think, yes, God works through people in that aspect of like,
Yeah.
"Hey, man, you're killing it. I know it doesn't seem like much, but thanks for what you're doing." And
Yeah.
it's like, "Okay, maybe something is here." But
Yeah.
then that question comes of, "Okay, where do we go from here?" And sometimes the answer is clear, and other times it's not because you have to find that. They always say, like, opportunity comes knocking at your door, which I don't really believe. I think sometimes you have to knock on its door. You have to be the
Right.
one to take the step, to
Right.
ask questions, to initiate those uncomfortable conversations
Right.
because
Yep.
they're not going to do it and
Right.
no one else is going to do it. And like, kind of like the whole you're in control of your own destiny, spiritual, kind of stuff. But it's like, it's true. And so things of like seeing those subtle signs to me are they're like subtle signs from God of like, maybe I don't like my job right now, but like I have this keyboard here, which I didn't have 2 years ago. I've always dreamed of like having my own little like music studio thing where I can do productions and things like that. And I never could
Yeah.
afford any of that in high school or anything. Probably too, because I was busy with that choir stuff. Um, but like now it's like I have this stuff and like I've like DJing down here, like doing DJ lessons now, and just all sorts of different things. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't have that if it weren't for this job, which
Right.
I wouldn't have had the job if
Mm.
if it weren't for that moment when I broke down in the car, like
Right.
screaming and crying.
Right.
And so there's like that whole things happen
Mm.
for a reason where everything
Yes.
is connected. And that's how I see God
Yeah.
essentially is it's just like
Interesting.
this way of just looking at like stepping stones where
Right.
you're trying to get from one way to another. And then also just seeing it like as a musician and acquiring knowledge of I often look at it like, do you know the philosopher Alan Watts?
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah, I've heard of it's a him, right?
So
It's a he? Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
He's a male philosopher. And so
Yeah.
he's always had this idea of like um when you listen to music, um you don't really listen to it just for the end, because if that were the case, then the best musicians would be those who played the fastest. So then like
That's
you
funny.
could just go
That's
to
funny.
like
I'm writing that
a
down.
concert and then it would just be one clashing chord and then hey, like that's it. But the point is like that clashing chord is so much more impactful because of everything else in between. You have
Yeah.
the rise and the fall, the tension and the release, all these sorts of different things. And that's often how I see it with God. It's like we wouldn't know what evil is without good, or vice versa, or what love is without pain. And the thing too is I think people often think like, people always say, well, why is this happening to me? Why did God pick me for this to happen? And to be frank, I don't know. I wish we knew, but we don't. But sometimes I look back on those moments and I see where I'm at now, and it's like I certainly learned a lot from it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But it's also totally valid to say that it wasn't a positive experience and that I
Right.
wish it never happened. Like,
Right.
it's totally okay to say that.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
totally okay to say,
Yes.
God, I felt like you really dropped the ball there. Like,
Yeah.
I understand
Like, hey,
that's
God,
where I'm at here,
we
and I
talk.
understand this
Yeah.
is where you got me now,
Right.
but I
Right.
still don't like what you did back there. And
Right.
he's like, sometimes it'd be like, hey, that's okay because you you stuck with it. And that's the point is I think we often paint this picture of, especially as Christians, as we're supposed to always like God. And that's the issue is like in a lot of like these preachy things, sermons, they sort of downsize or downplay struggles of like, I know you have depression, but it's okay. God will get you through it. And it's like, that's not how this works.
It's like
It's like,
God invented therapists for a reason. Like
yeah,
God invented mental
yeah.
health services for a
And
reason.
and things too of I think oftentimes Yeah, I think a lot of our influences, they're not really directly influenced by God himself. It's more of just people who follow him. Hence why sometimes I think people don't necessarily hate God, they just hate
Right.
the people who follow him. And it's not even his fault. And it's how it is. And so I think that's how I've always viewed church, is I've always seen it as just a way of silent reflection, as to try and figure out what that next step is. And the thing too is to always remember that you're not doing this to try to impress someone or for it to be an image and to like try and dress your best. And then that's such a stupid thing too.
No, not
People
at
do
all. I
that.
don't think.
No, 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 no. I guess I meant to like
I thought you meant your idea,
just
like,
like go
being
go
was
off into some other tangent of how people want to like judge each other just because of how they dress or like
yeah, I thought
something
you
like
were saying, like, "I'm not gonna finish that idea. That's stupid."
yeah,
I was like, "No, it's
yeah,
fine."
no, no, no. It's just there's so much like judgment, and it's the whole thing of like only God can judge me, and it's like and I guess the thing too is everything is just easier said than done.
Everything.
Everything
Everything.
is easier said than done, and in those moments, like you don't realize it. I'm not gonna say that my relationship with God has been particularly great recently. It's
Yeah.
just trying to figure out okay, what do you want me to do now, and like what are those steps to take. And it's the thing too of like that's why you have to ask those questions and express your feelings and to do things of like therapy or to do things just outside of work, something in the creative field. And I look back at it now, and especially from when I started, all from like my St. Francis days in the choir, and it's it's really cool not only to see where I've gone, but to see where all of my friends have gone and see how their views have changed. But no matter what, it's like I'm still friends with those people, and it's always so
Yeah.
fun to like hang out with them and
Yeah.
to just see that it's very it's very enlightening. It's just it's being smart, being spiritually smart, I guess, of what you have, and you think you know what you need to do. Maybe you don't know exactly, but you just act on it in faith, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with other people. And by doing that, so just by thinking and acting on faith and being nice to others, like that's all God really ever wants. That's
Yeah.
like the Bible. That's like I, I'm Catholic. That's the other stereotype, which is Catholics don't really read the Bible. So I'm not sure how many pages in the Bible that is. I think that's like over 2,000 pages, but that's 2,000 pages
It's
summarized into like two thoughts. It's
right.
just trust God, trust yourself, and trust others. Like it's not, it's not, it's really hard,
Yeah.
just trying to do that, but it's not,
Yeah.
that's what's so cool about
Yeah.
things. And the same thing too about I know I'm like jumping everywhere, but like things too of like the Song of Solomon, which is cool because it explains things of like how we should love each other in a relationship and things of like love or lust. It's really cool, and
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah.
just there's everything that like it's like you take what resonates with you, but don't always just take it at face value. There's
Yeah.
always something more, you know?
Yeah.
So, like, there's
Absolutely.
always more that meets the eye, and
Absolutely.
you go from there.
Well, Tim, this has been a really fantastic conversation. I feel
Oh,
like I've
yeah,
learned more
I
about
just
you in
feel
the
it.
last, like, hour and a half than I knew about you in, like, 8 weeks of being in
Yeah,
the same like, of you being in my class.
yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, you were in my stand-up comedy class last year, or I guess probably yeah, that was last year. I was gonna say it feels like a lot longer than that ago.
I can't believe yeah, it's almost been, like, a year,
Almost.
like
Like a
9
calendar
months,
year.
and
Yeah.
like our comedy showcase thing was,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like that's the cool
But
thing too, is it's like doing gigs and like going out
yeah.
and doing those things, and so things of like in my sets, it's like I try to be as honest about like the boners and the
Yeah.
whatever
That's
possible.
like that's like the comedy part of you coming out, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
but it comes from a genuine place of, like,
Yeah.
questioning, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes being honest and having people laugh about
Totally.
it, it means, "Hey, they can relate to that too,"
Totally.
which means
Totally.
God's like, "Hey, I think you're doing the right thing, and you know
Right.
what? If you, like, kinda poke fun at me sometimes, that's okay, because many moons ago, I decided to put that joke into your head, and then you
Yeah.
just wrote it down, so
You should just
you
start
ain't
doing
so bad."
filthy jokes and
Yeah, you
telling people
yeah,
God put those jokes.
dirty jokes, because he was the one that technically
Yeah.
wrote them
Yeah.
years
God listen,
prior,
God wrote these jokes.
so, and
But, if anybody's listening and they have questions for Tim or comments they would like Tim to know, you can email me. I'll put my contact form down in whatever platform you're listening or watching on. You can find the contact form in the, notes, the show notes. You can also find the I believe on YouTube you can leave comments there as well. You can also leave comments on Discord. Any place that you can find Growing Up Fundie, you can leave comments and tell us questions that you have for Tim, comments, thoughts, things you agree with, things you disagree with, and I'd love to forward your thoughts his way. But Tim, thank you so much. I recognize that I kept you, I think, like 45 minutes longer than I said I
no,
would, so I
I kept
apologize about
you for
that.
45 minutes longer
But
because I didn't stop blabbering, so
no,
thanks
no, it
for
was great. I
yeah,
loved it.
that was
Like I
fun.
said, I learned more about you in the last hour and a half than I did in those 8 weeks, and I love that. It's so
Yeah,
genuine. It's like a totally different side of you.
yeah.
But thank you so much for sharing your time and your story and your thoughts and opinions, and thank you for not being afraid to admit that even people who consider themselves devout members of the faith, they have questions, and
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
perfectly acceptable, and that's perfectly okay, and that's the best way to maintain your faith almost is to be allowed to explore those questions and not be afraid to, like you said, have that personal relationship that you feel you have with God that involves questions. And sometimes you're mad and sometimes you're confused. And sometimes you're like, God, hey, didn't really like what you did back there. We got to talk about that. Um, yeah. So thank you for that, Tim. It was a delight.
It was a delight. It was a delight to talk to you too.